Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. 8 decades ago, the United States joined an alliance of nations in a world war to defeat fascism. Millions of Americans fought and sacrificed in that war, including the father and mother of General Mark Milley, who in 2019 would become the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top-ranking general in the U.S. military when Donald Trump was president. And now Mark Milley is warning that fascism is taking hold again, not in Germany or Italy, but here in America, telling journalist Bob Woodward that the biggest threat to democracy and safety in the nation is its 45th president, the man he served under, the man who wants to be the 47th president, Donald Trump. And as Woodward recounts in his new book, General Milley told him, quote, "He is the most dangerous person ever. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline and so forth, but now I realize he's a total fascist. He's the most dangerous person in this country, a fascist to the core," Milley repeated to me. I will never forget the intensity of his worry. Former top general is warning that on Election Day, 21 days from now, America could elect a fascist to be president. And Mark Milley is right, because Donald Trump is running a straightforwardly fascist campaign at this point. It's becoming harder to ignore as threats of violence and racism become an increasingly central feature of his rhetoric and his rallies. It was on full display this week as he chose to hold a key rally in the heart of blue Colorado, not a battleground state, in the Denver suburb of Aurora, which is where, for weeks, Trump and running mate J.D. Vance have pushed a fake narrative that the city is paralyzed by gangs of migrants. Now, to be clear, it's a bigoted lie, every bit as false and racist as Trump's claims about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. And just like they did in Springfield, local Republicans, including the Republican mayor of the city of Aurora, Colorado, are calling out Trump's lies. But that doesn't stop him and his campaign from using Aurora to make their disgusting, dishonest argument about an enemy within, complete with visuals saying America is under occupation and needs liberating. Trump aide Stephen Miller even led rally goers through 2 minutes of hate as he pointed at scary photos of alleged migrant criminals.
Look at all these photos around me. Are these the kids you grew up with? Are these the neighbors you were raised with? Are these the neighbors that you want in your city? No. These are the criminal migrants that Kamala Harris brought into your community. And as swiftly as they came, Donald Trump will send them back.
He's a creepy, weird guy, not a particularly charismatic speaker, but also not lacking in subtlety. Trump got right up and turned the fascism up to 11, amplifying the racist hatred of migrants, vowing to mobilize the state to use violence against them.
Kamala has imported an army of illegal alien gang members and migrant criminals from the dungeons of the third world. I'm announcing today that upon taking office, we will have an Operation Aurora at the federal level. To expedite the removals of these savage gangs, and I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
Yes, the Alien Enemies Act. Trump is promising to round up migrants using a law passed under John Adams, nation's second president, along with the, remember, Alien and Sedition Acts. That law was designed to allow the president to authorize the relocation, arrest, or deportation of any man older than 14 years old who hailed from a country at war with the United States. It was invoked by Woodrow Wilson to throw Germans out of the country in World War I, and it also led to the U.S. internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. It's a disgusting stain on the history of American pluralistic democracy, and Donald Trump wants to use it to round people up on American streets. And if you think you're safe because you're not a migrant, Trump would never use that power against you. Well, on Sunday, he talked about who he thinks the real enemy is.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen. We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries.
Again, this is not complicated or controversial. This is just textbook fascist way of talking, right? The idea that if you resist, you, your neighbors, your family could be domestic enemies of the state, more dangerous than a foreign adversary. And this is the campaign Donald Trump is running for president. It's all out there for all of us to see. The only way it could be more fascist is if he painted Democrats as unworthy moral degenerates.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens. Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
That ad is being run by the Trump campaign wall-to-wall in swing states on football weekends during Major League Baseball playoffs. I've seen it dozens of times. And they're making a bet here. Pretty straightforward bet. He and the Trump campaign believe that that kind of thing, fear and bigotry, is going to win them the election. That's the bet of this fascist campaign. It's a war on truth, on the people who tell truths. It promises a violent ultimate victory over every perceived enemy of Donald Trump's, using the power of the state, invoking the voice of the people against the stab in the back. And he's running neck and neck in the polls with the sitting Democratic vice president. Why is that? Well, for one thing, after decades of far-right media programming, a lot of Americans are primed for an authoritarian leader. I mean, there's some portion of the country, tens of millions of people that I think just affirmatively like the strongman pitch. They want that. Now, of course, it rarely works out for them in the long run. Survivors of these kinds of regimes stand as evidence that no supporter is really safe from the regime they boost. The second critical advantage fascism has in America today is the press, by and large, still doesn't know how to fully communicate the perilousness of our situation. In part, somewhat understandably, because Donald Trump is, in fact, the world's most famous liar. He is such a liar that even many of his biggest supporters simply think he'll never do the things he says he'll do. As one Republican pollster told the New York Times this week, the normal rules just don't apply to Donald Trump, and you've seen it time and time again. That pollster said that his polling and focus groups indicated people think he says things for effect, that he's blustering, because that's part of what he does, his shtick. They don't believe it's actually going to happen. And again, I think this is defensible at some level. I get why that's the case, right? But the question whether you should take Trump seriously or not did get a definitive answer in 2021 in his last weeks in office, right? Remember that? After he lost the 2020 election and attempted a coup to stay in power, including inciting the deadly insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. Remember that in the lead up to that election, there are lots of people saying, it's all bluster. Conservative columnist Ross Douthat in the New York Times wrote that, quote, there would be no Trump coup, adding that Trump was a noisy weakling, not a budding autocrat. Trump's former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, wrote that if Trump loses, he will concede gracefully, he'll fight hard to make sure the results are fair, and in the end, he'll accept the result, whatever it is. We now know just how deadly, brutally wrong those contentions were.